Tony Abbott is just about to step up. Let's cross to him now.
Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Look, the crisis on our borders is just getting worse. This is a government which has completely lost control of our borders, and as we saw earlier this month, with 6 boats in 6 days, this government has no answers whatsoever to the deepening crisis. Now, the essential problem is that this government's policies have given the people smugglers the perfect business model. Now, we in the coalition want to reintroduce the policies that have been proven to work. And to refresh your memory, essentially they are rigorous offshore processing at Nauru, temporary protection visas so that the people smugglers don't have a product to sell, and the option of turning boats around where it's safe to do so. But today, Scott Morrison and I announced 3 enhancements that would immediately be put in place by an incoming coalition government. First, there would be a strong presumption that illegal boat people who have destroyed their documents not be given refugee status. Second, the minister would exercise the right to appeal against affirmative decisions, an existing right which has never been exercised under this government. And third, we would establish an integrity commissioner who would report every 6 months to the minister on what is happening to the processing success rates, because what's happening now is that effectively 90% of people who arrive illegally by boat are given a successful outcome. Effectively, in this country, the people smugglers are able to deliver on their promises. Now, other countries have much heavier rates of rejection. We want to know why this is, and the Integrity Commission would be the Integrity Commissioner would be there to ensure that our system was working properly. I want to say what an outstanding job the Shadow Minister Scott Morrison has done on the border protection issue. And Scott, over to you.
Thanks very much, Tony. Labor has trashed confidence in our immigration program because they've lost control of our borders. Confidence in our immigration program is critical to the success of that program, and that's why Tony and I and the Coalition are just so committed to getting these controls back in place. The amazing adventures of Captain Emad have only highlighted the end-to-end farce that is happening on our borders, and there remain very serious questions for the government to answer, in particular Minister Bowen, when you have a situation where the Australian Federal Police have known about this individual for 2 years, yet it seems that Minister Bowen only found out when the program went to air on Four Corners on Monday night. So Minister Bowen is still yet to answer the question, when did he find out about Captain Emad being an alleged people smuggler on his books. These circumstances highlight again the problems that we have with the integrity of this process. And we have a situation where they can find their way in, and then we can't stop them from finding their way out, which I think all Australians just shake their head in amazement, as the Indonesian government has expressed also this week. Now, there are 2 issues. First of all, we've got 90% of people turning up in this country who arrive on illegal boats without any documentation at all. And those who indicate that they have come into Indonesia or Malaysia by plane, in almost all cases, they are found not to have documents when they turn up in Australia. The second issue is we have a rate of acceptance, as Tony has just outlined, which is extremely high by international standards and extremely high on planes with documents. And these discrepancies, I think, are undermining people's confidence in this country about the integrity of this process. And we have to restore the integrity of that process. And that's what these measures are designed to do. Otherwise, you simply have a system where I think the perception can be created that this government is just basically ticking and flicking people through the process in order to try and remove another headache of their own making, which is the record of arrivals coming into Australia, the on this process, chaos in our detention network, and so on. So the measures, as Tony outlined, are using existing powers. Section 91W of the Act enables to form a favourable view about someone's identity and status and citizenship. That power can take the form of a directive which would instruct and assesses that where they believe someone has destroyed their documents, then they will be able to presume against refugee status in those cases. Secondly, would be in a position to exercise his own call-in powers, his own appeal powers, to ensure that yeses are checked, not just noes. Under our current system, noes are checked by the appeal process by applicants, but yeses, and it's important we have some balance in the system to ensure yeses come under scrutiny, just not noes. And that leads to the Commissioner. The Integrity Commissioner will do a comprehensive analysis of these decisions, both the initial decision and on the appeal decision where there is a review decision in place. So we can have confidence that if someone is accepted as a refugee in this country, they are fair dinkum refugees, and a government can say to the Australian people that these claims are fair dinkum. And at the moment, I don't think Australians have that confidence with this government. So these measures, combined with the measures that Tony has already outlined, and we've outlined on many occasions, will restore integrity in the process, will restore control of the borders, and will restore public confidence in our very important immigration program.
Okay, do we have any questions?
You're saying that there are a lot of people who are arriving in Indonesia and Malaysia by plane and then coming on here in boats. How can you back that up? What evidence, what numbers do you have for that?
Well, everyone who comes to Indonesia from Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan normally comes by plane. That's the way it normally happens. Now, if you arrive in Indonesia or Malaysia by plane, you have documents. You are not allowed to board a plane without documents. You're not normally allowed to get through customs at an airport without documents. So the vast majority of the people who get on boats to come to Australia had documents before they got on the boats, and if our people, our officials think that those documents have been destroyed, henceforth, under a coalition government, there will be a strong presumption against granting refugee status.
But it doesn't necessarily follow that just because there are people arriving in Indonesia and Malaysia with documents that they're the ones getting on the boats. What evidence do you have, what numbers do you actually have that the people coming here are people who actually had that documentation because they initially arrived by plane in Asia?
The evidence of officials at Senate estimates over numerous hearings, and these hearings go back now over several years, and I'd refer you to Mr Morehouse's own evidence at the more recent hearings, and what that evidence showed is that around 99% of people who turned up in Australia and said they'd arrived on a plane in Indonesia had no documents when they arrived in Australia. Now, that's the evidence provided by officials, and the evidence provided officials at countless estimates under the questioning of Senator Cash has been that they are aware that documentation is thrown away. Now, on occasions that's at the instruction of the people smugglers. On occasions it's at their own initiative. But that is the evidence before the Senate.
Surely if there was a way to tell. Those documents are usually fake. They travel on fake documents to get there. So we know that. That's established as well.
There are fake documents and there are real documents. And the point here is the most important document a genuine refugee would have is documentation which tells us who they are. That information is gold to a refugee. It's the most precious thing that they have because it proves their claim. Now, what I don't think Australians will put up with is when we have situations where, and the Captain Emad saga proved this, where we have someone who came into the country and the AFP and the Indonesian authorities clearly know about this fellow, and his family came in earlier and said that Captain Emad was dead. Now, clearly, people are putting stories over on our officials, and they need to get a strong message that the Australian public are not going to be mugs, and the Australian government is not going to have a system which allows them to be played for mugs.
Do you think that the AFP's activities with the people smugglers needs to be investigated?
Look,
They've been paying informants.
look,
And people involved in people smuggling themselves.
Look, we strongly support the police. We believe that the police are doing a good job under difficult circumstances. More than $200 million has been cut from Border Protection Agency's funding under this government, most significantly from the AFP. And is it any wonder then, with funding cuts, evidence of weakness on the part of government, these sorts of things happen? But I don't hold the police responsible for the disaster on our borders. I hold the government responsible for the disaster on our borders.
Back to the issue of paperwork, surely if there was an easy way to tell the difference between people who'd thrown their documentation away and people who genuinely didn't have it, surely we'd already be doing that. I mean, isn't it quite hard?
But there is no evidence, none, that this government is taking seriously the problem. There is no evidence whatsoever that this government is saying to these illegal arrivals, if you don't have your documentation, if you have destroyed your documentation, it will go ill with you. Now we, an incoming coalition government, on day one, will be putting in place these three important enhancements, and it's very important that a strong message goes out to people smugglers and their potential clients. If you don't have documents, well, if you destroy your documents, there will be a presumption against refugee status.
The vote saying that is so easy and that it's a tick and flick system would be highly offensive to case managers in immigration who work flat out trying to assess these very complicated assessments. They would be terribly, terribly dismissive of your tick and flick allegation.
And the very least we can do is to support their work by saying if people don't turn up with documents, if there's evidence that people have destroyed documents, well then there's a presumption against refugee status. We want to support the work of the assessors. We want to support the work of our border protection agencies. We want to make it easier for them in the difficult circumstances they find themselves, and insisting that people have got to come with the documentation that they've got is a very good way to help them.
We have been listening to a press conference from the opposition leader Tony Abbott and his immigration spokesman Scott Morrison. We just lost that link, as you can see there. Hopefully we can return to it when it comes back. But just to reiterate what they've had to say, they essentially want to reintroduce the policies of the previous Howard government in terms of border protection by reintroducing processing in Nauru, as well as temporary protection visas, and where necessary turning the boats around. And Tony Abbott says he wants to work on the presumption that if people coming into this country illegally don't have documents or have thought to have destroyed them, that they will not be granted refugee status.